The Great Reset. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, I'm Florian.Heise and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee, I think you're going to need it for this one. Today I thought we'd have a look at the Great Reset, which is the theme for the 2021 World Economic Forum. The event held in Davos, which is, well, where the global leaders and elite meet to discuss issues surrounding the world. Look at the images they have on their website here. What does that tell you? What are the concerns that are raised here? What are the aspects of society that they're worried about? Before we look at this and a few other things, let's look at a portion of this clip, the beginning of this hour-long video that explains, well, it's part of the forum. I'd like to look at it in detail, in full length in a live stream. We'll do that at another time, maybe later tonight. But for now, let's have a look at this to at least get us started.
It's underway. Let's hear from the forum's executive chairman and founder, Professor Klaus Schwab.
Thank you, Adrian. It is obvious that we are in the midst of the most severe crisis the world has experienced since World War II. 75 years ago, countries and people came together to shape the post-war global order, which brought us decades of peace, increased global cooperation and prosperity to hundreds of millions of people around the world. The COVID-19 crisis has shown us that our old systems are not fit anymore for the 21st century. It has laid bare the fundamental lack of social cohesion, fairness, inclusion, and equality. Now is the historical moment, the time, not only to fight severe virus, but to shape the system for the need for the post-corona era.
Some interesting points there. I mean, it very clearly articulates the issues with the system. But look at just the tangent there. Look at the opportunity that this presents.
We have a choice to remain passive, which would lead to the amplification of many of the trends we see today. Polarization, nationalism, racism, and ultimately increased social unrest and conflicts. But we have another choice. We can build a new social contract, particularly integrating the next generation. We can change our behavior to be in harmony with nature again. And we can make sure that the technologies of the fourth industrial revolution are best utilized to provide us with better lives. In short, we need a great reset. We have to mobilize all constituents of our global society to work together. We must not miss this unique window of opportunity. For this reason, I'm grateful that we are joined for this announcement of the Great Reset Initiative, not only by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales, but by representatives of international organizations, business, trade unions, scientists, and above all, the young generation. Now we have the very special message from the United Nations Secretary General, Antonio Guterres.
So that was the beginning of the World Economic Forum introduction. And as I said, we'll go through that in greater detail. But it quite clearly demonstrates the, so shall we say, technocratic approach of the leader of the world, or should we say founder of the World Economic Forum. And in many ways, I would say quite concerning, at least to those of us who are advocates for individual liberty, individual freedom, and individual resilience. Feels like we're being spoken down to by our betters. Let's have a look here at the About section, and we'll go through this. The Great Reset, a unique twin summit to begin in 2021. The Great Reset will be the theme of a unique twin summit in January 2021, conveyed by the World Economic Forum. The Great Reset is a commitment to jointly and urgently build the foundations of our economic and social systems for a more fair, sustainable, and resilient future. It requires a new social contract centered on human dignity, social justice, and where societal progress does not fall behind economic development. Now, on face reading, this all sounds good. It all sounds good. But the argument of a social contract, if it's forced, is it moral? Can you have a forced social contract that you can have no say in? Can it be moral? Social justice is quite dangerous. You see, it's used to discriminate. It's used to unfairly marginalize certain groups. We've seen that. There's evidence of that here in Australia itself. Remember, there was a recent study where civil servants, where all of the identifying information of candidates was removed, and it found that, well, actually, if it's merit-based and only on qualifications, there was less racism than if the identifying characteristics of the applicants was there. And the societal progress does not fall behind economic development. Now, the concern with this is capitalism has been the best factor in improving the quality of lives throughout all of history. Whenever you get interventions into the market, whenever you get freedoms restricted, whenever you get central planners trying to step in and do better, what are the unintended consequences? Every time throughout history. The global health crisis has laid bare long-standing ruptures in our economies and societies and created a social crisis that urgently requires decent, meaningful jobs. Now, I mean, you never let a crisis go to waste, everyone. Never miss an opportunity. The Twin Summit will be both in-person and virtual, connecting key global governmental and business leaders in Davos and a global multi-stakeholder network in 400 cities around the world for a forward-orientated dialogue between the younger generation. This feels very similar to the interview I did with a futurist here, and he was an odd fellow. And what I found quite concerning, as I couldn't understand why he didn't have ideological differences in the groups that he was getting information from. He simply thought ethnic differences was sufficiently enough. He didn't appreciate the fact, or he didn't care, that unless you have ideological differences in political philosophy, you're not going to get a robust dialogue. That's the danger of just being in an echo chamber, and it can happen at all levels. Dissenting thought, and we'll see this in the technocratic approach, it's marginalized, it's minimized, it's pushed to a side. You can see that happening every day, particularly with people being refused services to different businesses, refused services to banking, refused services to necessities of modern life. That's the danger of what we could be approaching, and there'd be a lot of people that would advocate for it. So you can see here, and some of the key speakers. So in Geneva, Switzerland, on the 3rd of June 2020, the Great Reset will be the theme of a unique twin summit to be conveyed by the World Economic Forum in January 2021. The 51st World Economic Forum annual meeting will bring together global leaders from government, business, and civil society, and stakeholders from around the world in a unique configuration that includes both in-person and virtual dialogues. We have one planet, and we know that climate change will be the next global disaster, with even more dramatic consequences for humanity. We have to decarbonize the economy in the short window still remaining and bring our thinking and behavior once more in harmony with human nature. Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum. Now, that statement there I find concerning. The argument to decarbonize the economy is insane. It's insane. Look at the Copenhagen Consensus. There are a multitude of other issues that are much more pressing than the effect we're having on the climate. This is a slow-moving disaster. This is something that we can manage, we can mitigate over time, and is happening already. We don't need forced, rapid changes to the economy. Just look at the effect that this intervention into the economy is having to mitigate this health impact. Think of the number of increased people that are losing their businesses, losing their homes, the number of people that are offering themselves or dying. But it's the price we pay for the glorious new future, everyone. The glorious new technocratic utopia. So I'll let you go through this in your own time. I mean, you've got the Prince of Wales here. Ever since I learned about his take on urban design, I've got very little respect for him. And I'll let you go through this, and let me know if you'd be interested in having a live stream going through the whole video. But now let's jump over, and I'm going to have a shot of coffee while we do, to this article written from the Mises Institute, because I think it's quite a good topic to look at. From lockdown to the Great Reset. The lockdown in the wake of the pandemic has accelerated the implementation of long-held plans to establish a so-called New World Order. Under the auspices of the World Economic Forum, global policymakers are advocating for a great reset with the intent of creating a global technocracy. Now, what we need to look at is what a technocracy is. And did I bring that up here? No, I didn't copy it over. We'll jump over here because there is a very interesting takeaway from technocracy, and we're seeing it here. It's part of the appeals to authority, and we'll have a look at it here, what the definition of it is. So technocracy is an ideal system of governments in which decision makers or makers are elected by the population or appointed on the basis of their expertise in a given area of responsibility, particularly with regards to scientific or technical knowledge. The system explicitly contrasts with representative democracy, the notion that elected representatives should be the primary decision makers in government, though it does not necessarily imply eliminating elected representatives. Leadership for decision makers is selected on the basis of specialized knowledge and performance rather than political affiliation or parliamentary skill. Here's the thing. You elect your leaders, but you've got the technocrats, bureaucrats in the background giving the advice. And if we go down here to one of the critiques of it, and so critics have suggested that a technocratic divide exists between a governing body controlled to various extents by technocrats and members of the general public. Said another way, technocrat divides are efficiency gaps that persist between government bodies employing technocratic principles and members of the general public aimed to contribute to government decision-making. The central challenge raised by these divides is the technocrats' provided privilege and aristocracy to their opinions and viewpoints of technical experts, while marginalizing the opinions and viewpoints of the general public. We're raising up a new class of aristocracy, a new priestly class in this global government system that have, an appeal to authority. And you see it all the time. You see it all the time whenever you engage in debates or discussions with people. MMT is a example. People always make appeals to authority. Oh, Professor such and such said that, or Professor such and such said this. Same thing with regards to diet. Oh, here's this paper from these doctors. And then if you have a look at the paper, it's all based on an example of one postmenopausal woman who had a reaction to a diet. So someone's using that to justify an entire life decision that contrasts with evolutionary history and the history of surviving civilizations. That's the thing. It's the appeal to authority. We're starting to see it manifest here. You get the feeling it doesn't matter who you vote for. You get the same people actually calling the shots from behind the scenes, the same advice from the bureaucrats, from the experts. And I guess for some people, if you haven't actually worked in a profession, or if you haven't actually worked or taught at a university, you might blindly accept what's put to you by authority figures, by these so-called experts. But once you start to see beneath that veneer, once you've worked with these people and see how some of them can purely get a promotion to professorship due to political reasons, you become a little bit more skeptical. And skepticism used to be a good thing. But in this new technocratic, technocracy, it could be seen as wrong thing, couldn't it? So, it is not by coincidence that on October 18th, 2019, in New York City, the World Economic Forum participated in Event 201 at the high-level pandemic exercise organized by Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security. And we can see this here. You can see this is event 201. And people will, here's the thing, people will put this in the comments, go, look, event 201, it was all planned, it was all organized. Now, you have to be careful that you don't fall into confirmation bias. That if you want to see that this, what's happening is a planned event, if you have a bias hoping that everything fits into place, you can be suffering from a confirmation bias from seeing this. One argument I would put forward is that you've got all of these people around the world that have engaged in an event like this, that are prepped, that are primed, that are persuaded. And I'll get into that in a moment. But let's have a look at this here. Let's read about this. So Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted Event 201, a high-level pandemic exercise on October 18th, 2019, in New York. The exercise illustrated areas where public-private partnerships will be necessary during the response to a severe pandemic in order to diminish large-scale economic and societal consequences. So you can have all these people that are primed, prepped, they've got these plans in place, they've got these strategies developed, and they want to implement it. They want to implement it. I bet a lot of you are experiencing this right now. You've prepped for economic issues, you've invested in gold, you've invested in silver, and now your plans are starting to come to fruition. Are you a little scared? Thinking, what is this actually happening? I planned for this. Fantastic. It's all coming good. It's all happening. It could be a similar thing here. In recent years, the world has seen a growing number of epidemic events amounting to approximately 200 events annually. These events are increasing, and they are disruptive to health, economies, and society. Managing these events already strains global capacity, even absent of a pandemic threat. Experts agree that it is only a matter of time before one of these epidemics becomes global, a pandemic with potentially catastrophic consequences. A severe pandemic which becomes Event 201 would require reliable cooperation among several industries, national governments, and key international institutions. So you can see here that, people are worried, people are prepared. And the thing is, they're right. These events will become more and more common because human population is increasing. We're encroaching on natural environments. We'll get more exposure to animals and diseases that could result in outbreaks. That's going to continue until 2064 when our population peaks, and then we steadily start to decline. That's just life, everyone. That's a part of nature. It happens when you encroach on the natural world. If you're eating more bushmeat, there you go. There's a risk presented right there. Now, I wanted to draw your attention to some books. That I suggest you read that are very good by Robert Cialdini. Two of them. The first is Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion, the revised edition. Oh, you can get it from $5, 18, secondhand. I recommend it. I've read it. This was a fantastic book. And then another one here, Persuasion, a revolutionary way to influence and persuade. These are two books I draw your attention to, just to understand how you can be manipulated, how you can be influenced, how people going to an event like this and getting one thing after another put towards them could prime them, could persuade them, could put them in a heightened state to respond and potentially overreact. In some regards, I'd suggest potentially we're seeing a global mass hysteria that's been exacerbated by experts all around the world giving the same advice under a worst-case scenario, because you can't blame them. You can't blame them for not wanting they don't want to be the person that said no and go against the grain, to give the wrong thing, to give the wrong opinion. It takes, significant bravery to do that, and some people won't. And we can see how in today's culture, in today's society, that if you have a heterodox narrative, you can lose your ability to have your job. You can lose your ability to even buy things. So, this coming technocracy involves close cooperation between the heads of the digital industry and of governments, with programs such as guaranteed minimum income and healthcare for all. The new kind of governance combines strict societal control with the promise of comprehensive social justice. The truth, however, is that this new world order is digital tyranny, world order of digital tyranny comes with a comprehensive social credit system. And we've seen that in China, and you're already seeing that happen now, bit by bit. It's just digital shunning. Guys, it's digital shunning, really. We're not inventing anything new, we're just more efficient at it. We're more efficient at our shunning, at our societal shunning. Humanity, you'll love it. The People's Republic of China is the pioneer of this method of surveillance and control of individuals, corporations, and socio-political entities. And this is true. This is why so many people are concerned about China. It is an authoritarian regime. You've got one leader, everyone. In some ways, they've got greater freedoms than we have here in our country. Just rest on that thought for a moment. So for the individual, one's identity is reduced to an app or chip that registers almost any personal activity. In order to gain a few individual rights, and be it only to travel to a certain place, a person must balance such apparent privileges with his submission to a web of regulations that define in detail what is good behavior and deemed as beneficial to humankind and the environment. You better not sin in the eyes of this religion, everyone. For example, during a pandemic, this sort of control would extend from the obligation of wearing a mask and practicing social distancing to having specified vaccinations in order to apply for a job or to travel. And here's this one thing. You've got people who are concerned that they're going to roll out this vaccine and it'll be this amazing nano chip that will control your mind. I mean, I think that's cool. I like Star Trek too. But I can tell you a much simpler explanation. It is a way of showing your ability to accept the narrative, even if you don't completely agree with it. It's your way to conform. It's your sign that you are one of the people that agrees. Can you argue with that? And my concern is there will be a lot of people that will be concerned that they will shun you if you don't go along with the narrative one way or another. And this is the easiest way to check if you're one of those people with the wrong think, or one of those people against the narrative. So it is in short a type of social engineering, which is the opposite of spontaneous order or of development. Like the mechanical engineer with a machine, the social engineer or technocrat treats society as an object, different from the brutal suppressions of the totalitarianism of earlier times. The modern social engineer will try to make the social machine work on its own according to the design. For this purpose, the social engineer must apply the laws of society the way the mechanical engineer follows the laws of nature. Behavioral theory has reached a stage of knowledge that makes the dreams of societal engineering possible. The machinations of social engineering operate not by brute force, but by subtle nudge. And this is referencing a book here about nudging. Subtle differences in behavioral changes you can make. It's strategies government used to manipulate you. And that's why I'm drawing your attention to these books here. Persuasion and influence, just to see from a marketing perspective how that can have such an influence of you. People don't need to worry about being controlled, everyone, because we already are. We're already slaves to our little phones. They can manipulate us. These apps and these things are designed to release dopamine rush releases that, well, if it was a drug, you'd need a prescription. Why do you think children can get addicted to these things, guys? So, under the order envisaged by the Great Reset, the advancement of technology is not meant to serve the improvement of the conditions of the people, but to submit the individual to the tyranny of a technocratic state. The experts know better is the justification. And what do you think about that? The argument that the experts know better. We see it all the time. We see it all the time. How many people you see simply appeal to authority, simply appeal to the expertise, because then they don't need to think and they don't need to question. Maybe they've never been trained to have critical thinking. I saw this when I was at university. I saw it when I was tutoring in this subject, where it was all about greenwashing, and they simply fell into line. The students would simply fall into line. They wouldn't challenge what was put on the table to them. And for me, it was actually the best subject I ever did. It put me down a road of being quite critical. It introduced me to very interesting things, like Lomborg, all of his work, and Rosling, his work as well. And recently it was my discovery of well, the 5-nation study or the 7-country study? 7-nation study. Just how, the 7-country study. Just the concern with Keyes's research, how it's been criticized now, but the fact that it was the expertise and it guided so much of our health advice and dietary advice and has had significant consequences. Now it's been found to be fraudulent. That's the issue here. Most people don't question the expertise. And you'll find often, like, nutrition is one example. You go to a nutritionist, they're not scientists. Most of their research, how many of them can tell you anything other than the guidelines? So the agenda. The plan for an overhaul of the world is the brainchild of an elite group of businessmen, politicians, and their intellectual entourage that used to meet in Davos, Switzerland in January each year. Brought into existence in 1971, the World Economic Forum has become a mega global event since then. More than 3,000 leaders from all over the world attended the meeting in 2020. Under the guidance of the WEF, the agenda of the Great Reset says that the completion of the current industrial transformation requires a thorough overhaul of the economy, politics, and society. Such a comprehensive transformation requires the alteration of human behavior, and thus transhumanism is part of the program. The Great Reset will be the theme of the 55th meeting of the World Economic Forum in Davos in 2021. Its agenda is the commitment to move the world economy towards a more fairer, sustainable, and resilient future. Now, I see that, and I just see poverty. Fairer, sustainable, and resilient. I see poverty. I see discrimination. I see weakness. That's what I read in that. An anti-competitive nation. The program calls for a new social contract that is centered on racial equality, social justice, and the protection of nature. Climate change requires us to decarbonize the economy and to bring human thinking and behavior into harmony with nature. The aim is to build more equal, inclusive, and sustainable economies. This new world order must be urgently implemented, the promoters of the WEF claim, and they point out that the pandemic has laid bare the unsustainability of our system, which lacks social cohesion. Well, I would say that's got more to do with other issues that probably are the result of some of the things that the World Economic Forum put forward in the past. I'm not sure, but I'd put money on it. The WEF's Great Reset project is social engineering at the highest level. Advocates of the reset contend that the UN failed to establish order in the world and could not advance forcefully its agenda of sustainable development, known as Agenda 2030, because of its bureaucratic, slow, and contradictory way of working. In contrast, the actions of the Organizational Committee of the World Economic Forum are swift and smart. When a consensus has been formed, it can be implemented by the global elite all over the world. And, I mean, here you have the things. You've got Agenda 2030. You've got other people calling upon Agenda 21, a comprehensive plan to take action globally, nationally, and locally by organizations of the United Nations. Now, my issue with all of these things is that they sound good. But you can see it starting to manifest in town planning, in sustainable development plans, in all of the regions of Australia. Now, here's the thing. I would argue that in a democratic representative nation, a free nation, the guidance or the flow of the legislation that affects our day-to-day lives should be driven from the bottom up. It should be the will of the people manifest by our leaders, our elected officials. It shouldn't be coming from top down. It shouldn't be the influence of global agencies, even if the goals, the goals are good, the desired outcomes are fantastic. It still needs to come from the people up, not top down. That's my concern with this. And you can see it every day. Every time you put a town planning application in, guys, there are elements of that affecting business day to day. So social engineering. The ideology of the World Economic Forum is neither left nor right, nor progressive or conservative. It is also not fascist or communist, but outright technocratic. As such, it includes many elements of earlier collectivist ideologies. And I mean, my bias against collectivism is quite clear. I've demonstrated that in many videos. I'm concerned about it because, well, forced collectivism takes away individual rights and liberties. What is more important to you? There's the question. I suspect Australians are leaning more towards a collectivist ideology and might actually embrace some of the technocratic solutions put forward to us and happily give up some freedoms. Let me know what you think, everyone. So in recent decades, the consensus, there's a good word, has emerged at the annual Davos meeting that the world needs a revolution and that reform has taken too long. The members of the WEF envision a profound upheaval at short notice. Sounds interesting. The time span should be so brief that most people will hardly realize that a revolution is going on. The change must be so swift and dramatic that those who recognize that a revolution is happening do not have time to mobilize against it. The basic idea of the Great Reset is the same principle that guided the radical transformations from the French to the Russian and Chinese Revolution. It is the idea of constructivist rationalism incorporated in the state. Now, let's have a look at the concept of constructionism, guys, the definition of it. So it's an approach to learn that holds that people actively construct or make their own knowledge and that reality is determined by the experiences of the learner. So how do you use that to your advantage by the state? You have to shoehorn people, guide it. But projects like the Great Reset leave unanswered the question of who rules the state. The state itself does not rule. It is an instrument of power. It is not the abstract state that decides, but the leaders of special political parties and certain social groups. Earlier totalitarian regimes needed mass executions and concentration camps to maintain their power. Now, with the help of new technologies, it is believed dissenters can easily be identified and marginalized. The nonconformists will be silenced, disqualifying divergent opinions as morally despicable. And if you've spent any time on the internet, you can see how this is happening. This is happening on YouTube. This is happening all around the world, where businesses are just removing people. You saw it happen with Stefan Molyneux. I would argue that his opinions are challenging, and he probably isn't the most profitable person for them to run. But then again, if he brings audience to YouTube, and then they'll go to other things, they'll consume more content and watch YouTube's. I'm sure there would have been some advertiser that would love to have been associated with him. But there you go. This is the thing: divergent opinions, wrong think, everyone. Wait till you hear about more people losing their banking privileges. The 2020 lockdowns possibly offer a preview of how this system worked. The lockdown worked as if it had been orchestrated, and perhaps it was. As if following a single command, the leaders of big and small nations and of different stages of economic development implemented almost identical measures. Not only did many governments act in unison, they also applied these measures with little regard for the horrific consequences of a global lockdown. And we saw some governments being offered money from the IMF on conditions that they implement these lockdowns and restrict these freedoms. There you go. I mean, they're prepared, everyone. People have prepared. They've trained for this. They want to implement it. They're worried. People are worried. They've been persuaded, everyone. They've been persuaded. They've been primed for this. Ready, vigilant. I'm going to save the world. I'll be the hero. It doesn't matter if the numbers are a bit wrong. We need, lying now to the state that it could be worse than it actually is. It's justified. If you were in this position, if you thought that the world, you could potentially save hundreds of thousands, if not millions of lives, what would you do? Months of economic standstill have destroyed the economic basis of millions of families. It's quite true. Together with social distancing, the lockdown has produced a mass of people unable to care for themselves. First, governments destroy the livelihoods. Then the politicians show up as saviors. The demand for social assistance is no longer limited to specific groups, but has become a need of the masses. Well, we can see that here in Australia. How many people have been living week to week? How many people have been living week to week? Once, war was the health of the state. Now it is fear of disease. What lies ahead is not the apparent coziness of benevolent, comprehensive welfare state with a guaranteed minimum income and healthcare and education for all. The lockdown and its consequences have brought a foretaste of what is to come, a permanent state of fear, strict behavioral control, massive loss of jobs, and growing dependence on the state. And I need a shot of coffee, everyone. With the measures taken in the wake of the pandemic, a big step to reset the global economy has been made. Without popular resistance, the end of the pandemic will not mean the end of the lockdown and social distancing. At the moment, however, the opponents of the New World Order of digital tyranny still have access to the media and platforms to dissent. Yet the time is running out. The perpetrators of the New World Order have smelled blood. Declaring the coronavirus a pandemic has come in handy to promote the agenda of their Great Reset. Only massive opposition can slow down and finally stop the extension of the power grip of the tyrannical technocracy that is on the rise. And this was written by Anthony P. Muller, a German professor of economics who currently teaches in Brazil. So there we have it, everyone. What do you think? And also here is the book of Schwab, Shaping the Future of the Fourth Industrial Revolution. So I think Klaus here is acting on his best interest. This is the thing, guys. I would give people the benefit of the doubt that they truly are trying to help and truly think they're on the right path. They truly think they're the good guys. Maybe that's naive on my part, but everyone tends to think they're the good guys. But the problem is, what are people willing to sacrifice? Now, I know this might be a little bit more, well, shall we say, depressing than simply discussing the constant spruiking of property that occurs in Australia. But this is certainly something that we all need to be aware of. Now, I wouldn't feel distraught or forlorn. There's still opportunities. There's still time. This, after all, is just a movement. Just a forum. There's still ways to dissent. You can publicly declare your dissent. You can let it be known in the ballot box. You can advocate for political parties to completely purge the bureaucracy. Is that what needs to happen? Let me know your thoughts and opinions in the comments below, everyone. I would suggest you take a rather stoic approach. Be aware of what's going on. Know what's beyond your controls. Do what little bit you can. But don't let it ruin your day. As always, thanks for watching. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down below. Like, share, and subscribe to the channel. Have you heard of the Great Reset before this? Do you think it's, is it right? Is it right that bureaucrats, leaders, and experts are, well, taking guidance from organizations like this? Can you imagine dissenting opinion is even allowed in this forum? Let me know what you think. Thanks for watching. If you're a fan of the channel, there are a few ways you can support us. You can simply share the videos, get the content out there. You can comment and engage with the channel. You can support us financially via joining us on YouTube or Patreon, using our affiliate links at Amazon, eBay, Independent Reserve, or Kucoin, buying our merch from HeiseSays, using Gold Pass from the Perth Mint, or supporting us via PayPal. Take care, everyone. Have a great day, and I will see you all in the next video.